We're going to get a bit more analysis now with French politics editor Marc Perelman, who joins me on the set. Marc, now the left took not just Paris, as we saw there with Emmanuel Grégoire, but France's two next biggest cities, Marseille and Lyon. Was that a surprise?
Well, clearly it's a good performance in large towns. Obviously, this hides a poorer performance in rural areas and mid-sized towns, but clearly the big prize for the socialists was Paris, because first of all, they've been in power for a quarter of a century. Normally, people want to see fresh faces, fresh ideas, different orientations, and there was a lot of thinking that, maybe now the right would be able to come back to the Hôtel de Ville, as the Paris mayorship is known. It didn't happen at all. It's a clear victory by Emmanuel Grégoire, and what's notable is that he decided not to ally himself with the France Unbound, the far-left candidate, Sophia Chikirou. He took a big risk, because if he had done so, yes, he would have been criticized for doing so, but he was essentially assured that he would win. He took a gamble. He decided, I'm going to win by myself. And he was able to get probably some votes from the left, but also some votes from the center, people who didn't feel comfortable with Rachida Dati, not only because she's from the right wing, but also because she has legal trouble. She's a polarizing figure. Let's not forget, until a few weeks ago, she was culture minister, and being a Macron minister is not the most popular thing to be these days. And so clearly it's a big victory for Emmanuel Grégoire. In Marseille, it was a bit different. Benoît Payan, also a socialist who was a mayor this time around, the far-left candidate, he also refused an alliance, but the far-left candidate decided to pull out of the race, so this helped him edge the National Rally candidate. And in Lyon, probably the biggest upset, the Green candidate, who was really lagging in the polls behind a businessman, Jean-Michel Aulas, who was known as the owner of the Lyon Football Club, was able to pull off a real upset and make a good comeback. The race was very close, but he was able to stay there through an alliance this time around with France Unbound.
Now, there's been a lot of watchers of these mayoral elections trying to gain some insight into what this might mean for the presidential election next year. What are your thoughts?
Well, clearly, you shouldn't think, listening to me, that the socialists are going to win the next presidential election, because obviously it's not a mirror image. Those are purely local races, and every town is different. There are lessons you can draw. Yes, lower turnout. We've seen this in election after election. The big question is, how could alliances work? We know the National Rally is the favorite. We know they're going to run on their own. On the other end, France Unbound, Jean-Luc Mélenchon is probably going to run. The big question mark is what happens in between. Will there be a centrist candidate? Will there be a socialist candidate? Will there be a green candidate? The assumption is that if there are too many candidates, the National Rally will win next year's election. This is why what's interesting yesterday night is Édouard Philippe, who already said he was a presidential contender, had conditioned his candidacy upon winning the mayoral race in Le Havre, western port city of Le Havre. Some polls were showing that he could lose, but he actually won. So that's a good point for him, because at least he can say, I went before the voters, I won in Le Havre. This means I can probably do so nationally. The problem is that another former Prime Minister of Emmanuel Macron, Gabriel Attal, has his own ambitions. The socialists will have their own ambitions. It'll be very, very interesting to see what happens between the far left and the far right. There are many different views, many ambitions, and this will probably be the key for next year's presidential election.